The Shop 3 Sheep Eater. Written and read by W.P. Thrift, who can be contacted at Lantis Armstrong on Twitter. And cover art created by JD, contactable at Radix_L on Twitter. Chapter 11, The Warrior King. Austin trembled while looking at the blueprints he had been provided. He had sworn to Sheepeater that he was a master at construction, that he could bring to life his boss's vision of the perfect utopia, which Sheepeater had dubbed Sheepopolis. It was to be constructed over the ruins of Rayleigh. From the city's foundation, a new city would arise, greater than Rayleigh ever was even in its prime. Sheepeater's plans were still foggy to his gung-ho sheep. He apparently did have some kind of master plan, but he never said more than was absolutely necessary. Finding tour guides of this island, and then his assault on the island's master, was only the beginning. That much was very clear now. Fearing for his life after the horrors he had witnessed on Rayleigh, Austin was willing to say anything just to avoid Sheepeater's wrath, which he now had a new, much greater respect for. He had first awakened after encountering the great old god, who had existed before the universe's first spark of the Big Bang, to find what he first believed to be heaven. Austin was in a tropical paradise, palm trees and blue skies, and a lush beach untouched by humans for thousands of years. A mountain range, all green from down here, cut a semicircle around the island. It went on for miles. The miserable nightmare fog, which had clouded his vision and choked his lungs, was gone now, disappeared upon his awakening, like the bad dream he now thought of it as. Then he had turned around and come face to face with the eye socket of a skull 5 times his height. He screamed frantically, hurling himself back away from it. He landed on Jogamesh, whom Sheepeater had tossed out of the temple, along with Austin. Austin didn't know if Jogamesh had come to yet or not, as the foaming at his mouth could have been from a recent fright which had knocked him back unconscious, or merely an old one. The skeleton of Cthulhu was enormous, and only laid half outside of the temple, which now appeared to be only a cave. The golden doors were gone, the decorations within the temple replaced by rocky walls and stalactites. It was much smaller now, and Cthulhu's enormous body could no longer fit within it. Of the other things which were now missing, the endless blocks and yellow road were gone now as well. Austin would later ask about all of that, if it had only been a hallucination. He had come to learn that the city of Rayleigh had sunk deep beneath the earth long ago, but the distance between it and the surface simply didn't matter when Cthulhu was in charge of the island, and so it had appeared to be on the surface to them. It was completely gone now. Every last trace of the old god's empire had vanished, save his own bones, which looked bleached and weathered as though they had been here for generations. Sheepeater had sat, stomach more bloated than usual, propped up against the side of the cave wall, picking at his teeth with a fragment of one of Cthulhu's bones. His vine monstrosity form had retracted, no longer needed. He had all the powers of an old god digesting within him right now, his body infused with incomprehensible powers.
Stupid Cthulhu gave me the runny shits. Bah!
Sheepeater griped. While the island was just an island without the maddening, multidimensional influences of Cthulhu, Sheepeater declared that this would be where he had set up his operations. There may have been some special reasoning behind this, but Austin's job was no longer to question, only to serve. While in the thralls of mad panic, he'd sometimes question, but he'd quickly sort himself out. And there had been much of that over the past few months since Sheep-Eater's plan for Sheepopolis went underway.
I swear to you that I am a genius, sir. There's no reason at all for you to kill me.
Austin had pleaded his case to Sheep-Eater.
I can finish the construction of your city under time and under budget. Bah, that's stupid.
Sheep-Eater grumbled.
It's true. I owned my own theater, and it was well underway to being completely remodeled.
Austin promised.
It would have been magnificent, as your city shall be.
Sheep-Eater considered this.
Well, I only needed you and Jogamesh for the tour of this island. Then I was gonna hire a real team of experts to build Sheep-Eater Tower and, of course, Sheepopolis. We'll just leave then.
Jogamesh had insisted on that day, when negotiations were still being made.
We can't help you with this. You can't leave. Somebody might find out about my plans. I'll just eat you.
Sheep-Eater decided.
You can't possibly do this without us!
Jogamesh changed his story immediately.
Don't you know who I am? I invented inventing cities. I once traveled the lands of the world and built empires. One was so great that the citizens that loved me so very much begged me to stay and be their great warrior king. Is that so?
Sheep-Eater asked.
Yes, I ruled there for 1,000 years. It was the best kingdom ever. Which kingdom was it? Oh, you know, you wouldn't have heard of it.
Sheep-Eater thought about this.
So, just the two of you alone can build my tower and my city. Well, maybe with a little help we could. That's stupid.
Sheep-Eater grew angry.
We can do it alone.
Jogamesh insisted.
Just, we'll need the materials and I'll have some shipped in.
Sheep-Eater said.
But don't be wasting anything. I don't have unlimited money.
Since then, Jogamesh had pestered Austin to place an order for several massive, defensive cannons to be ordered and placed around the island, as he was worried about those horrible fishmen monsters that live just off the coast. Besides that, Austin had contacted someone to give him the layout of the island and have blueprints drawn up for a potential city to be built here. It was strongly advised against, but Austin's hands were tied on the location. Today, Austin sat in his tent, flashlight in his hand, as it was dark out, and a storm brewed overhead. Jogamesh could be heard crying from his own nearby tent. These weren't huge tents. They were the cheap, thin rubber type, like you would buy for your backyard to be used one time, see them disintegrate in the morning dew, and then throw them away the day after. Likely after spending the night sleeping inside after all, having abandoned the tent as soon as it got dark out. But it was the best they could afford, as they had already blown almost all of Sheep-Eater's budget on the cannons. They had set up this camp, or Sheep-Eater HQ as their boss had called it, a good distance away from the super creepy Cthulhu skeleton, far enough away that the beast's remains could not be seen. It was an open area among the trees where they had set up, but then most of the areas amongst the trees were open. From a distance, The island was an ocean of green, but the palm trees all grew irregularly far apart when seen from up close. Sheepeater HQ was set up a good ways inland, right up against one of the mountain's many sheer cliffs. Sheepeater himself hadn't ordered a tent. He had just ordered an XXL porta-potty which he put up a short distance away from their campsite, and spent almost every waking minute of the day, and even at night he would sleep in it. Apparently, the old god was still giving him diarrhea, even months later. It was inside of that dreadful porta-potty, which no one else would ever dare go near, that the controls to the island's cannons were located. It was a large black remote control placed inside of a plastic bag to keep it dry. Whether or not the plastic bag had successfully withstood the horrible things which Sheepeater did in there was anyone's guess. Nobody had ventured inside to check it out during the very brief times that Sheepeater had emerged from his new dwellings. Austin could see his reflection in the glossy blue surface of the blueprints. A streak of white hair remained from witnessing the old god, making him look old and tired, long before his time had come. That was his only real point of focus. The rest of the blueprint made no sense to him. It was just a maze-like pattern of white lines sketched out across the page, with numbers far too tiny for him to read without a magnifying glass, jotted down next to all the lines. The blueprints outlined in painstaking detail the entirety of the infrastructure which would be needed to support a city being built out here on this island. Most important was the layout of the sewage system, the power stations and roads, and the deep iron beam system which would extend far underground to support everything. Everything else could be built around those essential elements. Though at the heart of it all, in the dead center of the city, atop Cuthbert Peak, the tallest mountain peak on the island, would stand Sheep-Eater Tower. This was never going to work, he realized. Sheep-Eater was insane. This island was a terrible place to build a city. That's why Rayleigh City had sunk. Cthulhu. The first crack of thunder in the air made him jerk a little, but he could hear Jogamesh let out a blood-curdling scream at the sound of it. This was followed by rapid shuffling as Jogamesh crawled out of his tent, and a second later he was unzipping Austin's tent and forcing his way inside of it. He had coconut juice running down his beard. That was the only source of nourishment either of them had gotten since they had arrived. No, wait. Upon closer inspection, it was just drool. Gross. It had started raining as Jogamesh gave Austin a desperate smile.
So I just thought I'd pop over here in case you were afraid of storms. I figured your good buddy Jogamesh could help keep you company,
Jogamesh declared. Austin groaned.
I'm actually very busy. Well, I'm bored, so you should entertain me,
Jogamesh insisted. Another thunderclap, and he cowed down as though he were about to be struck. He glanced up, and then did a terrible job of playing it off like he wasn't scared.
I can see you're afraid of lightning. Did you know that I was once struck by lightning? You don't say,
Austin said dismissively.
It's true. My best friend in the whole world came at me with a gun one day, and he shot me. Can you believe it? Such betrayal! It struck me across the face, leaving a terrible scar. But you can't see it now because, my beard's in the way, you see. Anyway, I faked a heart attack so that he would leave. And he did. And then I was struck by lightning.
Austin groaned, not wanting to hear this.
And that's why I came here to protect you from the lightning,
Jogamesh concluded.
Say, did I ever tell you about the time I became the warrior king? Yes, many times. But it's true,
Jogamesh insisted.
I will now proclaim the deeds of Gilgamesh, the warrior king. I was a man to whom all things were known. I was the sword master who knew all the countries of the world. I was wise, I saw mysteries, and I knew secret things, including about the days before the flood. I went on a long journey, was weary, worn out with labor, and then I returned to rest, engraving on a stone the whole story.
Austin was brought back a bit by that story, not because he believed it in the least, but because something about it sounded so familiar to him. Had Gilgamesh stolen that story from somewhere? This thought sat in the back of his mind like an annoying gnat. He couldn't quite place where he had heard it before. Or perhaps he hadn't, and it was merely stress getting to him that made him think too long and hard about this nonsense Gilgamesh was spewing.
What do you want from me?
Austin demanded.
Can't you see that I have been given this impossible task of building a city here? Do you know how many people it would take to do something like this? At least 10,000! Preferably one of those 10,000 would know how to read blueprints, which I don't. Ah, then you were caught in a lie!
Gilgamesh grinned and nodded.
That's never happened to me, because I'm so awesome I don't have to lie.
Austin picked up a book of engineering, something he had special ordered out of a catalog Sheepeater had handed to him. It was funny how they could get small packages delivered via helicopter out here, though Sheepeater was mad at him for not having that come along with all the ships containing the cannons. Cannons which actual professionals had installed. Gilgamesh tried many times to escape on board their ships, but he was clumsy and loud, and they were vigilant for stowaways.
Say, Austin,
Gilgamesh began.
You do know how to captain a ship, right?
Annoyed that Gilgamesh was still talking, Austin put the engineering book back down. He really needed to take some time to study it, as the keys to understanding these blueprints might lie somewhere within it.
What about it?
Austin asked, exasperated. The answer was no, he did not. But, by some miracle, he had at least managed to run their ship up on land when they had arrived here.
Do you think that we could take that ship back to the mainland?
Gilgamesh almost pleaded, but tried to hide his desperation. Austin was about to dismiss that, but then he realized, as things stood now, he was only delaying the inevitable. Sheepeater would, sooner or later, realize that Austin had no idea what he was doing. And on that day, death would be the best possible outcome. Lightning struck in the sky, and a flash of Bialy's shadow was cast over their tent, making both of them jump at it. As thunder resounded, Gilgamesh screamed. They both exchanged glances, trying to confirm if they had just seen what they thought they saw. But nobody else was on the island with them. Right? They decided it couldn't have been a person's shadow that had just crossed their paths. That was impossible. Austin, upon calming down, gave Gilgamesh a very sincere look.
We may have to try and escape with that ship. Oh, really?
Gilgamesh bounced up and down, excited.
Shut up, you fool!
Austin snapped.
Sheepeater's porta-potty isn't that far away. He cannot catch wind of this.
Gilgamesh was annoyed.
Oh, so he can't catch our winds. That's so hypocritical of him. But there is a problem. That was a fart joke. The boat is stranded up on land. Did you get it? It was never meant to be stranded like that, and there's no easy way for us to push it back into the water. Because you didn't laugh. I didn't laugh because it wasn't funny!
Austin finally addressed Gilgamesh's stupid joke. The rain was coming down harder now, in thick sheets. The tent bowed in before a wind hit it and began to whip around, the sides pulling up from the ground, barely holding on. And then, as though to acknowledge Gilgamesh's stupid joke, Sheep-Eater farted loudly from within the realm of his porta-potty.
We gotta get out of here soon!
Gilgamesh pressed.
Think if we both push together, we could get it back into the water!
No, you idiot!
Austin shouted.
It weighs 1,000 tons!
He didn't actually know the weight of the ship, but it was gigantic and made of steel, so its weight didn't exactly matter to them, as it was far beyond their capacity to do anything about it.
Wait, I believe I may have an idea.
Austin turned back to the engineering book. He had been on the verge of studying it for days, ever since it and the blueprint he had requested had arrived here. But one thing or another always seemed to interrupt him. More than anything, what got in his way of cracking the book open was his own warranted self-doubt.
Oh, we're gonna build another boat!
Gilgamesh gasped. Austin shot him a dirty look.
I can use the magic of engineering to build some kind of lever. We can wedge under it and force it back out. With leverage, anything is possible,
Austin declared. And then he actually opened the engineering book for the first time and saw that it was nothing but math for 1,000 pages. Very in-depth physics, numbers, and principles with formulas that made his head spin.
Well?
Gilgamesh asked eagerly when Austin lowered the book again.
Or maybe not,
Austin admitted. Gilgamesh resumed his desperate look.
We're gonna get killed by Sheep-Eater!
Look, Gilgamesh,
Austin considered.
We've been stringing Sheep-Eater along for months now. Why don't we just continue to stall him for as long as possible and make the best of these last few precious days of our lives? For are these moments we live not the most precious to us, and all we truly have in the end?
I don't wanna die!
Gilgamesh freaked out. This wasn't going anywhere tonight. To make matters worse, Gilgamesh was afraid of the rain, and wouldn't even leave Austin's tent when he turned off his flashlight and said that he was going to sleep. After a brief argument, Austin agreed to let Gilgamesh sleep at the foot of his sleeping bag, so long as he didn't snore or kick or do anything else obnoxious. Gilgamesh promised that he was the soundest of sleepers, that Austin wouldn't even know he was there. What followed was a long night of Gilgamesh snoring loudly and kicking Austin non-stop. It was a long, restless night for the theater director. That concludes Chapter 11 of Sheep-Eater. Tune in every Tuesday for new chapters, and please subscribe to be notified the moment they're released. If you would like to reach me, you can do so at Lantis Armstrong on Twitter. That's LANTISARMSTRONG. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you'll join us again for next week's chapter, The Race.